Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, and today we got a huge leak as far as the rules are concerned with 10th edition 40K. So after reading through this and seeing some of the changes, I wanted to put together a video before I start my workday and go over some of these new changes and how they're going to affect 40K. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. I am going to be talking about this video in kind of a sense of 9th edition. So if you haven't played 9th edition or you're not familiar with 40K, some of this might be foreign to you. And don't worry, in the future, I do plan on working on more in-depth learn to play style videos, but there is still some information that we haven't seen. This is a lot. This is a lot to go off of. But there is still some little bit of information that I'd like to see and have and be able to reference so newer players are able to follow the game. So this is going to be done with the 9th edition mindset of knowing what 9th edition and how it plays. And is going to be, it's in my style, it's an audio cast so that you guys can, this is meant for the person at the, your work day, get something, some 40K for your work day, as I like to call it. So with that being said, pop in an AirPod, cue up your Bluetooth, turn the volume up to a comfortable level, and as always, please subscribe to the channel. And let's dive into this and get started with these leaks on 10th edition rules in Warhammer 40K. So I'm going to go through these images as they appeared one by one, no specific order, just the order that we've seen them in appeared, and go over any of the changes that we've seen and what, for the most part, is going to be staying the same. Any mistakes or anything I missed, please leave comments down below because I would love to know, as well as I'm sure anyone else watching this video or reading the comment section would like to know too. All right, so the first page that we see talks about selecting targets. For the most part, this is the same as we've always seen. You can, when you go to shoot with weapons and declare targets as will an overtone into close combat, you select your unit and you declare where all the weapons are going. So you can separate the squads and shoot at different ones like we've seen in the past. But if you shoot too many and wipe out a unit and you got guns that are wasted, guess what? You got guns that are wasted. That's it. You can't then, you can't go one by one and do all that stuff, which is good. That I agree with that as far as the overall health of Warhammer and as a whole. It also talks in here about the lone operative rule, which we've seen on a couple of character units, some of the bigger guys that aren't quite monstrous in size. So basically, lone operative just means you cannot target this guy unless you are within 12 inches of him. That's it. No character protecting, nothing else into there. You just need to get within 12 inches of a lone operative, and then you can target him. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Lets him stay protected and in the early points of the game. But if your opponent really wants to dedicate and try and take him down, they can get there. I'm probably sniper weapons might have some effect that goes in there. I think they were mentioned in here when we get over to it, but precision hits, as we're going to be calling it now in the future. Moving on to strategic reserves. Strategic reserves, this is interesting. I think this is more just this is a cleanup from what we've seen in previous editions. So first of all, strategic reserves and reserves are declared as two separate things that coincide with each other. Units are placed in reserve. How they get there is what is going to give you all the rules and how you use them. So strategic reserves are based on your battle size. And depending on the battle size, for us 2,000 point games, we can put up to 500 points in strategic reserve. This does include your transport and everything inside. With that being said, units that can deep strike while placed in reserve are not considered strategic reserve. So these will not be limited by the amount of units and points that you put to strategic. Those are that's basically set aside for units that do not have abilities that allow them to go into reserve, such as deep strike. As far as how much can be on the table now, because like units like Grey Knights that have a deep strike for days, can you null deploy? Do you have to have a certain amount on board? If you don't have any models on the board at the end of your turn, is that considered to be tabled and you immediately lose? Don't know that until we see the missions. One would assume that, yeah, we'd keep that into the game, but that's going to have to be a wait and see on that to see how that all comes about. Strategic reserves, it looks like they do not appear on the first battle round, as usual, so it's second and third turn. Second turn, they can come on from any board edge 6 inches in and 9 inches away from your enemy, just as we've seen in the past, and they're not allowed to go into your opponent's deployment zone. Turn 3, they can go into your opponent's deployment zone. So a lot of similarities from 9th edition there. The biggest thing is the cleanup of how much goes in strategic, and hopefully not costing us command points again, because that was rough. Moving on, we get a... okay, so this one I'm not fully understanding yet, and how this all works. So it talks about charging, and charging stays the same. You know, you charge to the model, you move, you have to measure the distance. If you're climbing up a wall, you got to take that in consideration, all that stuff. But fly. So the only thing they talk about with fly is that, again, you can ignore models when charging with fly. But it says that for terrain, you measure in the air. So it looks like from this point, I think that the terrain that's going to be on the table, like a rune or a wall, is still going to be taken in consideration when you do your charge. So if you're flying infantry, you probably can still breach through the wall and charge. But if you're something bigger like a monster, probably not. It looks like the only caveat extra for terrain is that if you're on top of a piece of terrain, because there's a lot of more focus being put on models being up a level in terrain, as we've seen with modifying your shooting. They're looking at units that are able to be on terrain. They're trying to add that third dimension into the game and make it matter more than it has in the past. For this, if you charge from one building to another, you can go King Kong mode and just measure straight across. So if you are 6 inches from a model to model horizontally and you have fly, you don't have to measure down and up. You can just measure directly across. So that looks like that's what it's covering. And probably from ground level too. Probably ground level and up, you get that direct path. But I think the terrain is still going to matter as far as like monsters and stuff like that not being able to charge through it. But that we'll have to wait and see when it comes into the terrain rules and stuff like that. We haven't seen anything for that. It's not mentioned here unless I missed it. But I don't think that it's not confirmed that you can't. But I'm thinking you're not going to be able to, as we've seen in the current edition. All right, making melee attacks. This is basically the same. The melee attack portion of it and actually attacking hasn't changed much. It's the charge and engagement, which is where the big change is that we're going to talk about. So this does talk about pile-in, but I'm gonna skip that for a second because I'm gonna bring that up when we do our consolidation and our charges, because that's the biggest change, I would say, for charging in combat. That's going to change a lot of the ways that some of the tech is played out and what I see so far for it. Again, making melee attacks, you'd select a unit, you select all of its combat and where its weapons are going to go, and then you start rolling the dice for it. Now, there is one change with this that I did notice with making attacks. You must resolve all the same weapons at the same time, or continue to, according to this. So if you have a unit with 3 Thunderhammers in it, you can't do 1 Thunderhammer and then do a bunch of single damage weapons and then come back to your multi-damage weapons to try to maximize killing. A lot of what I'm seeing, and I think a lot of us are seeing from what Games Workshop is trying to do, is they're trying to speed the game up, make it quicker with removing some things and that. And I think that's one thing that they removed, is that it's like, okay, you can pick if you want to fight with your hammers or your swords first, which ones, but you must do all of them. So it's not going to be as much of just one guy attacks, one guy attacks, one guy attacks. Okay, now you have fresh models. Now I'm going to hit you with the big weapon and try and clear fresh models. As it does say in this entry, that you have to fight with all those same models at the same time. Moving over into consolidate. This is where we'll talk with the pile in and the consolidate. So, piling in and consolidate, you can, you get the 3 inches like we've normally seen, but any model that can make it into base contact must do so. So engagement range has gotten changed over. Now we don't have that within an inch. Now it is base to base contact for combat. Any model that is in base to base contact can fight. Any model that is within base to base contact of a unit model in its unit that is in base to base can fight as well. And with the consolidate and pile in, you must attempt to get into base-to-base contact when applicable. So a lot of the combat tricks that we've seen in the past of being able to inch your way around a unit and not be in base contact and stuff like that are gone. This also is going to go into the charging too. For charging, when you declare a charge, you must attempt to base any model that is able to base. If you cannot, then you just have to end your move as close to the enemy as possible. So in the charge, there is still some possibilities of being able to charge closer to another unit for the fact that, you know, you're going to sweep. You got like 2 little dudes left that are very weak, very low armor, and you're going to roll them over and you want to tag another unit. That's fine. You can still do things like that. You're just going to have to be particular on which unit models you move first, because you're going to need to basically move your models to block base-to-base contact for other models to go. So this might involve moving models that are further away first, and then moving models that are closest, etc., things like that. I don't think there was a caveat that you have to move the closest model first. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comment section. But I think that that's the way you're going to be able to do that and get around it. Needless to say, though, the rest of it, you do have to get into base contact. Now, with the consolidate, there's one little extra piece that they put to it that I like this, but I'm a little confused on its execution. It does state that if you are not able to move to the closest enemy unit, you can then move to the closest objective marker. Well, in my mind, unless your opponent's tabled, you can always technically move closer to the enemy unit. I like the fact of being able to move closer to an objective marker. I just don't understand what they're going for with it, because technically there's always, if there's a unit on the table, you can still move towards it. So I like the concept, but unless I'm misreading it, you know, I mean, if there's a unit that's on the table, you can go towards that at all times. I mean, if you're 35 inches away and you move 3 inches closer, okay, now you're only 32 inches away from it instead of, you know, going towards that objective marker. I like the idea of being able to go back to an objective marker. It makes sense. It means that, you know, your opponent can't just inch their way around and wait till next turn and stand there and your guys are looking at them like, oh no, these guys are going to take our objective marker from us. They're going to come in here and fight, but don't engage them because then we lose the objective marker. No, go clear them and then come back on your marker. You know, and I like that. I think that fits into the game as a whole. How exactly we're executing that, we'll have to see. But there's the framework is there. So maybe somebody might have that already figured out of like, oh, okay, so this is how you do that. Again, comment section, please. Because I like that the framework is there. And I feel like that's going to be a big part of competitive 40K and being able to clear units off and still get on your objective, even if you might have to move a couple inches away from that objective marker. The article then goes on to talk about the data sheets, or not article, the images go talk about the data sheets and stuff like that before going into the actual abilities. So in here, Deep Strike. Deep Strike is what we've been calling it the entire 9th edition. Units in Deep Strike, it lands, it has to be more than 9 inches away. Turns 2 and 3, cool, just like we've seen. Infiltrator. Infiltrator is a keyword that now gives you the ability to forward deploy. So you can deploy the unit outside your deployment zone, more than 9 inches away from the enemy and the enemy's deployment zone. Scout. Scout allows you to make a free move at the beginning of before the first battle round. So you'll determine who goes first, and then any scouts will move. How we're doing that, if it's I do one, you do one, or I do all mine, then you do all yours, we'll see in the mission rules. But for the most part, Scout is seen as Scout X, where X is the value of how far you will move. So it's not your move characteristic, which is good. That's very good, because that means we can have units that can scout that typically have a very large move, such as Dragoons, which I love, can scout, but you're not getting a 10-inch scout or whatever move may be. It might only be a 5-inch scout move. So I like the fact that there's a value associated with what that scout move is going to be. And last on this page, which is probably the most impacting, is the leader rule. So leaders, when you determine when a leader is with your army, this step, we don't know where this step falls in, but it says during the declare battle formation step. I would declare battle formation, to me, kind of means that we're doing this pre-everything, pre-game. So that means you're going to, when you're constructing your roster, even, units may be assigned to a bodyguard. I think bodyguard is a all-encompassing word for any unit that the leader is physically able to go into. So a Primaris character that joins a unit of a Primaris Space Marines, that Primaris Space Marine is the bodyguard. The critical things in here are, number one, within wound allocation. So wound allocation is the same. When you start making taking wounds on a model, you have to continue taking wounds on that model. However, if your leader has damage to him, that model does not take the damage. In fact, it is specifically stated that your leader is not allowed to take any damage until the entire bodyguard has been removed. So no super tanks. So kind of sad about that, because there's some cool models like the Space Marine Relic Shield that I was like, oh, that'd be really cool to have him be able to bulk out in defense. But maybe he has some different abilities that it's like, okay, because he's here, now the unit gets a 5-up invuln because he's part of the squad, in which case he is still inherently being the tank for the unit. They're not allowed to take damage, even if they've already taken damage. So some precision strikes, sniper attacks, maybe if they damage themselves shooting a plasma pistol, that's not going to change the order. The bodyguard must always go first, and the character must always go last. When the unit is fully destroyed, it only counts as one unit being destroyed, even with any characters in there. So things like grind them down, you would get 1 kill versus 2, even though the leader died, because for all purposes of the game, they are considered to be 1 unit. Now we get over into stratagems. Okay, so they added more stratagems to the main frame of the game. So we took a lot of stratagems away from the codexes to make it simpler for that, and we put more stratagems in the rulebook, which means that these are universally accessible to everybody. So if you play 40K, you know you have these stratagems available, and so does your opponent. Command reroll is still there at 1 command point, with still a bunch of restrictions on what it actually can be used on. Pretty much the same, except they added the hazardous and desperate escape rolls can be re-rolled. A desperate escape, not familiar. Hazard is like plasma pistols and stuff doing damage to you, which that's changed a little bit, but you can re-roll the dice for that. And yeah, it's 1 command point, and it's used when you make a save. Counter-offensive, still 2 command points, still gives your unit fight first and lets you interrupt your opponent's attack sequence to attack with one of your units first. Epic Challenge. So Epic Challenge gives your character precision strikes, or the precision ability. So what I believe precision is going to be is give you the capability to, you get to assign the attacks instead of your opponent. This may be a way to get around the character rule. This will definitely be a way to have characters in units take out key weapons and stuff like that, where it's like, this is some softer opponents like Eldar that have really nasty characters could go charging in there knowing they're going to lose the squad, but in the process they take out a heavy weapon or two, or a heavy weapon that they don't like in that unit that could help them. It's like, okay, well, you lost your squad, but guess what? I took out the gun that matters, so now what are we doing? And it's a definitely an homage paid back to challenges back in the day. And we might see some stuff from that too, where like you can challenge out a character, even though it says that the character can't take damage. The heroic stratagem may actually allow that to be the case, is where you can get around that. Insane bravery. So now, whenever a unit is battle shocked, you cannot use stratagems on it. This is the one exception, and obviously being the exception and being able to be used against used on battle shock units, you can guess what it does. The unit is now not battle shocked. It is one command point. I don't see anything saying that this can only be used once per battle. But yeah, you just pick a unit that's this is a nice little thing about it. You pick a unit that's failed the battle shock. So you already roll, and then, oh, look, I failed my battle shock. I failed my leadership. So now I'm battle shocked. Okay, now you spend the command point to pass it. So you get the chance to pass it first, and then if you fail, then you have the strat to back it up. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool, that fact. So you're not spending CP guessing. I could understand the other route with it, but that's what we're looking at for this one. Overwatch, one command point, 6 is to hit. Fire Overwatch, same as we've seen. Go to ground is a new one that when a unit is targeted by a shot, you pop a command point. Use this stratagem, and it can only be used on infantry, and that infantry unit gets a 6-up invuln and can also gain the benefits cover. No negatives here, so it doesn't look like there's any issues with doing that, just that it costs you a command point. Grenades. Grenades is going to be an interesting one to see how this plays out. So you use this in a shooting phase, and one grenade unit from your army that's not within engagement range can be selected to shoot with this. Now, it doesn't have any caveat for how many models are in there, so apparently one dude can do this. You select an enemy unit that is not in engagement range and 8 inches away and visible to your grenade units. Roll a 6d6. For each 4+, that enemy unit suffers a mortal wound. That's going to be cool. I think there's some things like Death Guard are really going to like that one. Tank Shock. Tank Shock is awesome. Tank Shock is awesome. I can't get over it. It's so good. So you spend a command point when you charge with a vehicle, and you roll 1 dice for each point of strength that you have. If your strength is higher than the unit you're charging's toughness, you get an additional 2 dice. And for every 5 up, that unit takes a mortal wound up to a maximum of 6. I love it. I love it. Now, the previous one with grenades didn't have that max caveat, but you're only getting 6 dice. So you're still put at a point of how much you can do and maximize on that. For the vehicle, maximum of 6 mortal wounds. I'm assuming there's probably going to be some units that might be able to boost that and get +1 for like a ram or something like that. But that's cool. I love it. Tanks are going to be able to run people over. Yes, that's necessary. You got this big, giant treaded vehicle, but we can't move forward because there's a guy in our way. No, run him over, get to the objective, win me the game. Come on, Land Raider, do better. Oh, went over smoke screen. Heroic interventions. So now for 2 command points, all those other ones were 1 command point. So this is one of the 2 command point ones. Basically, you can heroically intervene with anything that is not a vehicle. Walkers are okay. Vehicles are not. So monsters are still good, all that stuff. And basically, it's if you're within 6 inches of an enemy unit, you can then make a charge roll. So you're 6 inches away, you get 2d6 to get into combat with them. You don't count as charging though, because now when you charge, when you complete a charge during your turn, you gain the benefit of fight first. So that means they're going to hopefully that's all cleaned up with the whole fight first, fight last, and all that stuff. as we've seen some issues in the past, but now it's like when you charge, you get the fight first ability. Same as the Counter-Strike, it gives you fight first ability. So less random words on what things do. It's fight first ability. That's what you gain when you charge or use that secondary. When you use heroic intervention, though, you do not get the fight first ability, so you do not count as charging. Rapid ingress. Ooh, this is going to be a game changer. So basically, I'll give the short version of it. It's one command point that you use at the end of your opponent's movement phase. And now it must be eligible, so you can't do this like turn one unless you're able to override and bring reserves in turn one through an outside ability. But at the end of your opponent's movement phase, you spend a command point, and you can now bring a unit in from reserve as if it was your reinforcement step. This will be, I love it. I love it. I immediately start thinking about Grey Knights, being able to go, okay, so that's where you're going, that's where you're at, that's where you can see. So I'm going to bring this unit down over here that's like 11 inches away, and now next turn I'm going to be able to move and then charge. Grey Knights are going to get fast and protected. It's one command point. The unit needed to already be in reserve to do this, and again must abide by all the rules and restrictions to when the unit would be allowed to come in. So again, turn one, you wouldn't be able to bring a unit in this way. You would have to wait till turns 2 or 3. Moving on, we got Big Guns Never Tire. That one actually did change a bit. So Big Guns Never Tire is that vehicles and monsters don't, they basically can shoot into combat. And they can shoot into combat, but they cannot be shot in combat by the unit they're in combat with unless they have pistols, just as we've seen before. However, they do subtract 1 from their hit rolls. It's not, oh, it's heavy, it's no. If you're shooting in combat, you're -1 to your hit rolls. Blast weapons still can't be fired in combat, etc., etc. So a lot of the stuff stayed the same, except for the fact that now it's not just heavies that are -1 to hit. It's all weapons are -1 to hit. The other interesting little thing that was added to this is while the unit that is in combat with the monster or vehicle cannot shoot at it unless it has pistols, other units can. So your tank in the backfield can shoot at a vehicle that is in engagement range, or a monster, even though your guys are in range of it. Okay, that's what we're doing now. That's that. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense. You're less likely to hit your guys when they're in combat with a Bane blade. I mean, these vehicles are large and encompassing, and you got 2 or 3 guys that are hanging around the outside trying to clip the treads. They're not exactly getting in the way of your laser that's coming downfield. On top of that, the Big Guns Never Tire. I'm not seeing anything that affects the actual shooting for like firing heavy weapons and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact that now we see the ballistic skill into the data sheet itself. So they've already taken that into consideration for heavy weapons and such like that. As we see when we get over to heavy weapons, how they're actually worded with moving and doing stuff like that. That has changed a bit. So vehicles and monsters, they don't receive any benefit for firing a heavy weapon off their profile because their profile has already been adjusted for those weapons and such. Makes sense. Makes sense in the long run. But being able to shoot vehicles in combat, that's going to be interesting. Also on this page, we get the stealth rule for units, and basically stealth is just -1 to hit them. Real quick, again, -1 and +1 to hit is the maximum that you can have. So if you are +2, you only get +1 to hit. If you're +2 and your opponent gives you a -1, you still got your +1 to hit. So all that's going to be the same. They also included the wound roll. So now wounds can only be modified + or -1 when you actually roll the dice. So all the same applies there. Hits and wounds are the same, equal to or better than your ballistic skill you hit. Wound roll, 6s will always wound, 1s will always fail. And it's the exact same chart from 9th edition. You have to be double, your weapon has to be double your opponent's toughness to wound on 2s. If you're above it, you wound on 3s. If you're below it, you wound on 5s. If you are twice below it, you wound on 6s, and equal is 4s, as we've seen in the past. Allocating attacks and saving throws. The only real big change here that I noticed, and this is something we've got teased in the past, you can only modify saves by 1. Or you can only receive the benefit of +1 to your save. Not the negatives, just the bonuses. So, sadly, Rangers, Skitarii units are not going to be going all the way up to 2-up saves anymore. Oh man, you know. And I know there's a bunch of people rolling their eyes going, they didn't need that. That's not necessary. A dude in a trench coat is not going to be the same equivalent armor of massive dreadnought tactical armor of a Terminator. I know. But listen, I can dream, can't I? And it talks about invulnerable saves can never be modified and stuff like that. And yeah, so the biggest thing is that you can only get the +1 to your save in any way, shape, or form. The next page brings up Feel No Pain and talks about mortal wounds. You know, mortal wounds, that their wounds are not wasted when they hit, that they go straight through. You can still take Feel No Pains versus mortal wounds, but no save or invuln. And, you know, you do 4 mortal wounds to a single model unit. You do 4 mortal wounds to the unit. So the damage is done to the unit, not the individual models. Feel No Pain is an X value now. So, if you have a Feel No Pain 5, you're looking at a 5-up on your Feel No Pain. Feel No Pain 6, you're looking at a 6-up on your Feel No Pain. So again, each individual unit on its data sheet will have a different value based on its points, etc., etc. And it'll be Feel No Pain X, where X is the value. Deadly Demise. Okay, cool. I like this. I like this a lot. It's simple, it's small, it's not a huge change, but it's definitely a quality of life change. So all vehicles fall under the same caveat now. You roll a dice when it's destroyed. On a 6, it explodes. How big does it explode? 6 inches. How much damage does it do? Check your data sheet. What is your deadly demise? Whatever your value is, if you're deadly, it says deadly demise X. So if you're a 3, that means that everything within 6 inches takes 3 mortal wounds. Real simple. It's done before the unit disembarks, so you don't have to worry about that unit disembark taking double damage. But it is a more of a set number and value, so it's a lot easier to keep track of, instead of what we have right now, where every unit individually basically has its own damage profile for how that works. All right, we get over into guns. Assault weapons can be shot even if they advance. Don't see any negative modifiers to it, so it looks like you can just advance and shoot. That's it. Cool. Pistols. Pistols can be shot in combat. They doesn't look like they get a minus to hit when they're shooting in combat. They just can. And they cannot be shot along any other non-pistol weapons, which is, again, this is like a Space Marine thing, because Space Marines can take a bolter and a bolt pistol, so you can't go in one hand a bolter and one hand a pistol. Pistols are lone weapons, which I think makes sense. Rapid fire, rapid fire X, increase the attack by X when targeting units within half range. So some guns may only get 1 shot, some ones might go up to 3 in this. It's not just doubling your shots, it's you get X shots when you're in half range. So that'll be cool to see. Some different guns will have different profiles. It's not completely streamlined at that, so that'll be nice to see. And then also tone down some guns that might have gotten a little crazy with it. Then we got the Torrent. All right, Torrent's Flamer. Torrent is flame weapons. Torrent weapons automatically hit. That was a guess a couple people made, and we'd seen it in the past, and that's what it is. Lethal hits. Weapons with the lethal hit in their profile are known as lethal hit weapons. Each time an attack is made with such weapon, critical hits automatically wound the target. Cool. So 6 is to hit auto wound. Okay, we just call it critical lethal hits now. That works. Lance is your close combat. So if you charge with a lance weapon, you get +1 to the wound roll. which, speaking of that, let's go over into Twin Linked. A weapon that is Twin Linked. Each time the attack is made, you get to reroll the wound roll, not the hit. So that's going to be interesting. Ignores cover, does like it says. It ignores cover for the unit that it's shooting at. I like the Twin Linked. I think it's interesting. We see a little more to the reroll wounds that we haven't seen in the past, so that's kind of cool. Melta we've seen already. Melta is X, so whatever damage you do additional damage of X based on what the Melta X is. Blast. So Blast changed. Blast changed a lot. So you get one additional shot with that weapon for every 5 models in the unit, rounding down. So 5 models, you get +1 shot, 10, you get +2. Okay? And then again, it cannot be fired in engagement range. A little bit of a nerf there. I think we're going to see less shots out of the blast weapons. It doesn't mean that they're going to stop seeing them, because a lot of blast weapons are still good. It's just kind of one of those I notice, especially with some of the armies I've played. Blast tends to be one of those rules that we sometimes forget, so it's going to have to be one that you have to teach yourself to remember. Oh, okay, this is a blast weapon, so if that unit's big, I get more shots. Precision. So, precision in their profile, what says in wounds attached to unit. If a character model in that unit is visible to attack model's player can choose to have the attack allocated to the character model instead of following normal rules. So, sniper rifles or the heroic stratagem that we saw before. Yep, you can hit that character model. So this is a way that characters may have wounds in a squad that they don't have to keep taking wounds if a precision strike is placed. But it does say you don't get to use precision strike to pick out like a hammer. So it's specifically for the character. Supercharged unit. Yeah, so it looks like it's just for the character. So what I said before about being able to take out that heavier weapon and stuff like that doesn't look like you can do that. You just have to still hit the character. And then heavy weapons. Now, instead of heavy weapons giving a modifier if you move, they give a modifier if you don't move. You get +1 to your hit roll if you don't move with a heavy weapon. Okay, that's just the other way around. Indirect. Indirect is if you fire indirect at a unit you cannot see, which is the most important part about this. If you fire at a unit you cannot see, the unit gets the benefit of cover. So if you can ignore cover, you can knock that away, and you are -1 to hit. So hopefully that doesn't make these weapons end up dominating the meta again. Anti, you have anti-X. So depending on what you are, whether you're anti-infantry, anti-vehicle, all those things, basically, regardless of stat characteristic, you will wound on that value or more. So if you're anti-infantry, but you have like a strength 2, and you're firing against strength 6, but it's infantry, and your anti-infantry is a 2, you would wound that infantry on 2. It's kind of like a little bit of poison effect, but they're calling it anti so they can encompass everything in there, vehicles as well. Devastating wounds. Devastating wound is basically when you get a 6 to wound with a devastating wound weapon. Instead of doing the damage normally, you do that shot's damage in the form of mortal wounds, and that ends. That'll be nice for some heavier weapons. I know we saw some of that on the Doomsday arc, so that's pretty cool. Hazardous weapons, your plasma pistols, and your weapons that can do damage to you. Now you just resolve the shots as you normally would, finish it out. Then at the end of it, you roll a dice for each hazardous weapon that was shot. And on a 1, they take a mortal wound. If it's a character, then they take 3 mortal wounds instead. So that's rough, but again, you have that 1 CP that you can re-roll the hazardous dice roll, and that is viable to re-roll it. It is attached to the CP re-roll. And then sustained hits, sustained X. Each critical hit scores X additional hits. So if you're sustained hit 2 and you roll a 6 to hit, you get 2 additional shots. A lot of just keywords and stuff like that. All right, charging. Charging is where we are going to draw this to an end. So like I had said with charging before, you're still 2d6. You complete your charge, you get fight first. But now you must be in base-to-base contact. So you finish in base-to-base contact, and when you make the charge move. Now, it states that you must try to do this as much as possible. What we see now in the game is people will charge, they might engage one unit and then charge everybody else in a different direction to use that 2d6 to get a little bit extra movement. While it's not fully gone, it is modified. You have to try to engage when possible. So this is going to take a little practice and finesse to see how round, but I think we'll end up seeing some similarities to what we did in 9th. It's just going to be more difficult. Now you need to charge first. Engage the unit first. And then when you cannot put any more models in base-to-base contact legally by the move that you got for your dice roll, then you can start moving in wild directions as long as your move ends up with you being closer to the enemy unit than you started the turn, or started your charge phase. So you could, if you got a unit that's 6 inches in front of you and you got another unit that's 10 inches and slightly off to the side, you can go and charge an 8 and get closer to that other unit to get ready to consolidate and tag them to shut them off from shooting. However, the first thing you need to do is make sure that any of those models you move that direction could not legally get in base-to-base contact with the unit you declared for the charge. So you're going to roll the dice and do all that stuff and move that. So this might be a point where you start moving units in the back, models in the back of your unit first to get an engagement, block these other models from being able to get into base-to-base contact, and now they're able to move and drift off to the side. In a lot of ways, you just really need one model from your unit to do that. So depending on the models and unit size, this might be very easy. Realistically, this is just allowing it to not be a complete and total spread, but the rule is still going to be there in a sense. All right, that was a lot. This is a bit of a lengthy video. I do apologize. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this gave you a good 45 minutes-ish out of your work day or cutting the grass or whatever, and was able to entertain you guys. This is what I like to do, and try and, for me, when I'm cutting the grass or just cleaning around the house, I like to pop in some 40K and just listen to people's ideas on the current game. So I hope that this community appreciates that. That's what I'm trying to put out there for you guys and have available. And again, please, comments down below what I may have missed, what I may have messed up. This is our time, and especially with this community, to start getting a knowledge and getting a good basis on what we've seen so far, this huge snapshot, before the game actually rolls out in a couple of weeks. We're getting real close. All right, guys. Time for me to go to work. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you all again soon.